Ubisoft is a company that's either loved or hated by most gamers for good reasons. I've noticed personally that they have their ups and downs. One moment they'll be on a roll making awesome games like Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six Vegas, Far Cry 3, but then the next year they'll release total piles of shit like Watch Dogs, The Division, Assassin's Creed Unity, Far Cry 4, Rainbow Six Siege. And you'll notice I'm mentioning a lot of recent titles here, and there's a point I'm getting to with that. And that's that if my theory is correct, Ubisoft has just had one of those down periods I mentioned. And based off information we got last year about Ubisoft trying to abandon the whole annual release plan, it's safe to assume that now it's time to start seeing good titles coming from Ubisoft. So, how does For Honor hold up to that expectation? First, I want to talk about the figurehead of this game. The bright, shining crown jewel of For Honor is its combat. Where Rainbow Six has always been Ubisoft's attempt at a realistic tactical shooter, For Honor represents their first foray into realistic medieval melee combat, with the primary focus being on the directional guard and attack system, so that combat becomes all about reading your opponent's stance to learn where they're going to attack from, and attacking where they're not defending against, you know, like in a real sword fight. It's topped off with all kinds of different special attacks and combos for each hero, as well as some actions that are shared with all of them, like guard breaks and parries, that when it all comes together makes for an exciting and engaging combat system. And the way you handle fighting multiple enemies by guarding against enemies on your left with the left guard and enemies on your right with the right guard, while still having to worry about attacks from all directions from your primary target, I just can't imagine any better way they could have done it. It makes it manageable to fight multiple opponents, but still a challenge at the same time, and as a result incredibly rewarding if you manage to successfully fend off multiple attackers. And not to mention the mindless glee rewarded by slaughtering hundreds of the smaller soldiers on the front lines, like a beautiful cinematic dance of death, except you're still in total control of your character the whole time. And the super satisfying environmental kills like throwing people into spikes or off of cliffs. And while this game doesn't really compare graphically to Resident Evil, and honestly it's a tough game to beat, it's got incredible graphical quality while still maintaining a very smooth frame rate. But where this game really excels visually is in its animations, both the static animations and cloth animations in particular. And the latter is something I've come to expect from Ubisoft titles, as they've always had good cloth physics. But the regular animations in this game are so well done as well that even the simple act of just standing around doing nothing can be just a little bit satisfying. I'll stand here and be suffused in a brilliant aura of majestic yellow light as I scratch my foot. And I just love that it lets you customize almost every aspect of each hero, with not only different emblems and paint patterns, but with each part of your character being modular with different styles you can equip and all kinds of crests and adornments you can put on your helmets, which is a feature that was sorely missed in Rainbow Six Siege, especially after Rainbow Six Vegas and Rainbow Six Vegas 2 established the idea that customizing your character and loadouts was just part of the Rainbow Six experience. And For Honor's multiplayer progression adds even more to the customization aspect, with reputation levels that you earn for each hero when you get them to level 20, whereupon your hero level resets. And as soon as you gain new reputation levels, more varieties of gear will be unlocked from mission rewards and scavenger crates, which means new customization pieces that you've probably never seen before will keep rolling in every time you level up. The Faction War is another unique feature in For Honor, where you pick a faction you want to fight for, although all classes are still available no matter what faction you pick. And after every match you play, no matter what it is, even if it's against AI, you'll get war assets, which you can send to a place on the war map of your choosing to help decide whether or not you win or lose the territory. Whichever team has the most assets on a certain territory will capture it, and whichever team has the most territories at the end of the season wins the season, granting unique rewards to players in the winning faction, which changes every season. And while I'm not typically a fan of meta games and map games like this, I feel like it was done really well here. And one of the things I really like about the Faction War is that it actually has a visual impact on the maps you play on, which I think the tutorial video does a terrible job of demonstrating, where playing on the same map 3 different times could be a totally different experience. Where playing on it one time it could be a swampy mire if the samurai control it, Whereas if you play the same map while the Vikings control it, you could be taking place in the snowy mountain. Now if you're like me and PvP isn't really your thing, but you heard that this game was going to be focused on multiplayer, well fret not dear friends, because like I said earlier, For Honor can be played entirely in PvE mode and you'll still get war assets. And what's more is that this PvE mode isn't just a cheap cop-out with easy bots that it's a free win. The AI they gave these bots is extremely impressive, and you'll oftentimes find the bots getting the better of you in PvE games. Especially if you start getting ranked up against level 3 bots. The quirky, unpredictable way these bots behave makes it so that you're not missing a thing if you don't want to play the PvP modes. And with the focus on the multiplayer being Ubisoft's main goal with this game, I was surprised by how good the campaign was. Now when I say that, I don't mean it was particularly amazing like Battlefields, but it was a solid narrative experience fully featured with collectibles and a decent story, even if it doesn't take an incredibly long time to beat. And the main villain uses annoyingly stupid logic, and a lot of the areas it takes place in are literally just multiplayer maps. So like I said, not a perfectly amazing campaign, and usually decent or mediocre isn't really worth mentioning in most of my videos. It makes me incredibly happy that they put as much focus into the campaign as they did considering such a heavy focus on multiplayer, and the fact that you can invite a friend to play co-op campaign with you earns a ton of points in my eyes, especially since co-op seems to be dying in the video game industry. And For Honor has a very unique solution to camera clipping. Whereas most games would simply move your camera closer to your character if it went into a wall, For Honor does this really cool system where it does like a cross section of whatever the camera is stuck in, making it so you still get a good view of what's going on around your character without fucking up the camera angle by moving the camera closer. And this last positive I have to say about the game is gonna surprise you. Microtransactions. Now, I know what you're thinking, I know. Murloc, how could you say such a thing? Microtransactions are terrible and they should not exist at all. I already paid $60 for the damn game and now you're gonna ask me to pay $100 to get 150,000 steel? Now look, calm down. For most cases, I would totally agree with you. I think it's a totally scummy idea to include microtransactions in a game that already costs $60 when they're going to be charging you for DLC packs later on. But listen, here's the kicker with the microtransactions here. For Honor's following the same business model and multiplayer layout as Rainbow Six Siege, except instead of renown, there's steel, instead of operators, there's heroes, and instead of having a special microtransaction currency like Rainbow Six Siege did, For Honor just cuts out the middleman and lets you buy steel instead. And since steel is also the currency you earn from playing the game, this means that everything available in the in-game shop is acquirable by just playing the game. But that's not the important part here. The important part is what these microtransactions allow the developer to do. And that's that instead of new content being introduced as paid DLC, new content is instead introduced as free updates for the game, where season pass holders get early access to the new content and they don't have to pay steel to unlock the new heroes, as well as one or two other perks that are irrelevant. This means that the game will continue to expand and there will continue to be new content each new season, whether or not you want to pay for it. And all this is because of the microtransactions, so don't get angry, especially since most of the microtransaction shit is cosmetic anyways. Lag. Undoubtedly one of the biggest obstacles to creating a multiplayer game, and For Honor handles it in the worst possible way. Instead of setting up dedicated servers for their dedicated multiplayer game, something that's well within the power of such a wealthy company, the game instead relies on peer-to-peer connections. And to avoid problems like host advantage, instead they make it so if one person lags, everyone in the entire game lags. Which means if one person joins your game with a shitty connection, you're gonna spend the entire match just waiting around for the game to reconnect before you finally get booted. And this also leads to problems with the matchmaking, as sometimes it'll take forever to find a goddamn match. And there's still a few really bad bugs that they didn't catch in the beta. Really annoying shit that could ruin your experience for the night. Combine that with some really terrible class balance when it comes to the 3 extra heroes that weren't included in the beta, and you start to get the sense that maybe it wasn't really a beta and it was just a promotional thing. Which is something that big developers do. A lot. And on the topic of heroes, there are a few of them that are just annoyingly gender locked for no particular reason. While quite a few of the heroes let you choose between male and female, there are just as many that are locked into their starting gender, and while it makes sense in particular with the Valkyrie class, there's absolutely no reason you can't have a male peacekeeper or a female lawbringer, aside from the fact that the game tells you you can't. And then another thing we come to that they missed in the beta is the skirmish game mode, which is sort of like a classical deathmatch with respawns and all that. And while there's nothing wrong with the game mode itself, including it in the very same matchmaking playlist as elimination was the stupidest thing they could have done. They should have done it the same way they do duels and brawls, where duels are one thing and brawls are another thing that you can queue for separately. They should have done skirmishes one thing and elimination another thing, both of which you queue for separately. I mean, hell, I'm sure there are plenty of people who like skirmish, but they're never gonna get to play it because everyone will always vote for elimination, which is the more popular mode. Next, some actions in the game require overly precise timing. Most annoyingly in particular is guard break counters. While it also means that a lot of classes have really insane reflex demands, they are labeled as hard difficulty classes, so I can't really complain too much about that. But guard break counters are a mechanic shared by every class, even the easy ones, and successfully performing a guard break counter requires such precise timing. For one, I wish you had just a little bit more time to react to a guard break counter once it makes impact. But also, if you happen to hit the guard break button before their guard break makes impact, I wish they would both cancel each other out. And the thing is, that does happen, but only if the two players hit their guard break button at the exact same time. So as it stands now, guard breaks are just way too ridiculously hard to counter. And I'm sure people would complain a lot less about environmental kills being so easy to perform if the guard breaks required to do them weren't so hard to counter. And my last real complaint about this game, something I'm surprised I don't see more people in game talking about because it's really grating against my brain every time it happens, is that every time you do one of your hero's signature combos, they will say the same exact phrase in whatever their native language is every single time. And it's especially annoying with heroes like the Lawbringer, where using those special combos is essential to playing your class well. They really needed to record more tracks for like the classes who have their vocalizations during special attacks. Having only one gets really annoying. Now, a lot of the suggestions I have for this game are things that actually seem pretty viable and something that could actually happen one day. Especially since they definitely have plans to expand this game with more game modes, maps, and heroes. Much like Rainbow Six Siege, which, to be fair, after its launch, it did turn out to be a pretty good game through content patches. It just never earned my purchase because of a lack of a campaign and character customization. Which, coincidentally, is the first thing I want to talk about, the campaign. Now, as lazy as it seems that a lot of the campaign levels are just multiplayer maps, I see a way that that can actually work in the game's favor. So if every content update they plan to add new heroes, maps, and game modes, they could also add a new chapter to the campaign featuring these new heroes and taking place on these new maps, and serving as an easy introduction to both. And next, I wish there was a way to do matchmaking for the story mode as well as just the regular game modes. As fun as it is to face off against the bots cooperatively in the multiplayer game modes, it just doesn't provide the same cinematic guided experience that the campaign does. And currently the only way you can play co-op campaign is if you have a friend invite you or you invite a friend, which I do definitely appreciate them doing, but it's a step down from the drop-in, drop-out match-made co-op we used to see in the days of Rainbow Six Vegas. And if they were to do this, it'd be nice if playing the campaign through matchmaking would reward us with war assets and steel that we could use in other modes, instead of having your levels in campaign be totally separate from the multiplayer like it is now. And on that note, it would also be nice if we could choose our character in the campaign where applicable and use our custom characters as well. It gets really annoying how there's several chapters of the campaign that feature multiple heroes in the same mission, but you can only play as one of them and you don't get to choose which. Now, for campaign missions where it only features one hero, I understand that, but when you're literally fighting side by side with the other heroes for the entirety of a mission, it begs the question, why wasn't I given the choice to play as one of these other heroes? Moving past the campaign, I really wish there was an option to vote or pick which difficulty of AI you're up against in matchmaking. It can be a stiff, incredibly rewarding challenge if you get matched up against really hard difficulty bots, but whether or not that happens is left entirely up to RNG, which tends to prefer putting easy bots in your game, leading to lots of easy 3-round wins where nobody dies at all because the bots just aren't hard enough. Hell, I'd be happy if just the default difficulty of the bots in the co-op modes was raised. Yeah, new players might struggle in the co-op modes facing up against these bots, but no more than they would in the PvP modes. And next, since they've confirmed that they want to add more game modes post-launch, it does remind me of another complaint I have about the game, is that there's no large-scale game modes, and there's no design for co-op modes like Terrorist Hunt in Rainbow Six Siege, or any of the Rainbow Six games for that matter. So since every single game mode in For Honor is designed to be played as both PvP mode and PvE mode, I see a way to knock out two birds with one stone here. Make a large-scale game mode similar to Rush from the Battlefield series, where two teams with limited lives either attack or defend against each other, pushing through large-scale multi-phased maps, and perhaps even featuring siege equipment like battering rams or war elephants or horseback riding like we see in the campaign. And this one game mode would serve double duty as both a large-scale PvP game mode, but also as a slower paced, more structured PvE mode similar to Terrorist Hunt, but still being unique to For Honor and not ripping off the formula word for word from Terrorist Hunt. And now, all things being mentioned, it's time to come to our final verdict. Now, barring server issues, bugs, and balance problems, this game probably could have been a 9 or a 10. And if it gets the same kind of post-launch support that Rainbow Six Siege did, maybe it can evolve into a game that deserves such a rating, assuming they actually fix the inherent problems with the game and don't just release more content, which in this case seems like something that's well within their power to do. But since there's no way to be sure if they'll actually do that, I just can't give this game such a glowing recommendation as a 9 or a 10. So my score for Honor is an 8 out of 10. Underneath its flaws, there is a phenomenal game here, and if Ubisoft decides to wipe the dog shit off the bottom of this game's shoe, this could turn out to be Ubisoft's next big hit. Hell, even as it is now, I still think I'm going to find myself going back to play it every new season. But right now, it's foolish to make such bold claims about For Honor. But hopefully this means Ubisoft is on the rise again and Ghost Recon Wildlands turns out to be another hit. But until then, I'll see you guys later.